Well, joining us now is CEO of the Comparateur Group and former advisor to UK Trade Secretary Shanker Singham. Really good to see you this morning. So looking ahead to the speech that we're going to hear from Andy Burnham, what do you think his plans would mean for Britain?
So, I mean, what I'd like to hear from Andy Burnham is going back to what Keir Starmer said at the beginning of his administration, which was that economic growth was the most important priority, and by that he meant wealth creation, and then actually doing some things that would actually generate economic growth and wealth creation. I think the Starmer rhetoric was good on growth, but the delivery, the policies that came behind that were all policies that actually damaged the economy and destroyed growth. So, you know, whether it's failing to do planning reform properly, whether it's not attending to the incredibly high energy cost in the UK, continuing to put more and more regulation, environmental regulation, etc., energy regulation that made costs of everything more and more expensive, or the Employment Rights Bill. The labour market in the UK is famously said to be flexible. It's not actually flexible compared to some other countries. And the Employment Rights Bill makes it far less flexible than, as your previous guest said, the minimum wage has gone up. It's the highest in the OECD. There are many things that the Starmer administration did that were very anti-growth. So if Burnham wants to actually generate some growth in the UK, he needs to go back to those things. And if we don't hear about that in this speech, if all we hear is more devolution by itself doesn't actually do anything for economic growth. It depends what those powers that are devolved, the people with those powers, what they do. And the track record of that in Wales and in Scotland, and to some extent in Northern Ireland, is not good on economic growth. In fact, their policies seem to be even worse than the central government with regard to growth. So devolution is not going to solve this problem. What's going to solve this problem is dealing with the regulatory barriers that exist in the UK and lowering the cost of energy, this type of thing. So if we don't hear that.
Right, but the problem that you've got with that, and in a way it's some of the arguments that the opposition parties use when they say, well, it's not about the man at the top, it's about the party as a whole, is that to do that, he's basically got to walk in and get rid of the Chancellor, get rid of the Energy Secretary, and basically undo everything they've done over the last 2 years?
Well, if you want to grow the economy, you cannot do that with the Employment Rights Bill. Already, employers are taking action because of the removal of the cap in industrial tribunals to eliminate some of their more senior staff. So this is going to have a very catastrophic effect on business. So when you're heading over a cliff, you need to stop and turn around and do what is necessary to get the economy back on track. If that's indeed what he wants to do, and it's going to be difficult for him because when they tried to do welfare reform, which is the other side of the equation, you've got to get the costs down, you've got to get the spending down. His MPs didn't allow him to do that. Now, it may be that Burnham, with a different bit of a honeymoon period, they haven't got Starmer to kick around anymore, as Nixon famously said. Maybe they will be a little bit more compliant on some of these proposals. I mean, he has got advisors in there, Andy Haldane and Sir Jim O'Neill, who have talked about limiting, getting rid of some of the burdensome regulation and so forth, and lowering the tax base. So we'll have to see if those voices are in the ascendant or not. And I would say to Andy Burnham, if you look at New Zealand in the 1980s, which was in a crisis, much as the UK is in now, or if you look at Australia in the 1990s, which was also in a crisis, it was actually two Labour governments that did the necessary, lowering tax, cutting regulation, doing all the things that typically you assume that a right-wing party would do. But it was the governments of Roger Douglas and Paul Keating that did those things. So it's not impossible for a Labour Party to do these things. And right now, that is what you need to do to actually give opportunities to people at the bottom end of the socio-economic ladder. So that's what I think I would like to see from him. Whether we will get that or not is another question.
You mentioned the importance of lowering the cost of energy. As part of Mr. Burnham's mission, what we're expecting him to talk about today is the reform of essential utilities, which is understood to mean greater state control of the likes of water and energy companies. Would that bring down the cost of our bills, do you think?
No, I mean this is again the same problem, which is the diagnosis of the problem, which is very easy to do. When you've got an energy cost that's 5 times the energy cost of the US, it's easy to say that energy is too expensive in the UK. But the solution is not to put even more state control on the energy companies, even less competition. It's competition that drives down price. If you nationalize everything, then prices will go up and services will go down. That's just what happens when there is no competition. Now, was the privatization originally in the water or the electricity industry done perfectly? No, and we could actually do it better. We should be trying to improve it. And in fact, Andy Burnham only has to look at the recommendations of the UK's own Competition and Markets Authority on energy, on rail, on transportation, and do what they recommended, which is not nationalising these things. It is actually introducing more competition, and we will find that that the prices go down. But there's a lot of energy regulation, environmental regulation that is driving these prices up. And on the one hand, they say they want to promote growth. On the other hand, they want to get closer to the EU's regulatory system, which is the cause of many of the burdens that we see. So, if you want to do these things, you have to diverge from European regulation in these areas. And if we see more of this conversation about alignment to EU regulation, joining the internal market, these sorts of things, Western Europe is doing as badly as the UK in terms of its overall economic growth trajectory, and losing ground dramatically with the US, as the European football fans in America in the World Cup are actually seeing now.
OK. Shanker Singham, appreciate your time this morning. Thanks very much indeed.